Now this is interesting as heck. IMF's, the International Monetary Fund's, epic plan to conjure away debt and dethrone the bankers? Am I in a nightmare? A nightmare, because that would never happen. The Telegraph, UK. What in the hell is this? I didn't read all of it. I just started reading it. It's a little bit of a read, and I'm going to read it to you, because this ties on to what the creator of the movie, the documentary, The Money Masters, and the same guy did the second part of that, which was called The Secret of Oz. Oz, like the Wizard of Oz, The Secret of Oz. And this secret is very simple. There's a solution better than gold and silver. And as much as I like gold and silver, especially silver, the solution, he's right, is actually better for everybody. See, when the things are crumbling and we're not there yet, gold and silver favor you and I. That's why we hold it. Because I'm somewhat certain, in my mind I'm 100% certain, that history is going to repeat. There's going to be lots of pain before any real change comes, obviously, because if there's no pain, no change usually comes. So the solution was to allow the government, not a private entity, take the private entity's ability to create money out. Get rid of it. And that today is the Federal Reserve and all central banks across the world. And give that power back to the state, the government, with no interest ever attached. No bonds, no nothing. You just print what you need to keep everything flowing smoothly. There's never a transfer of wealth. There's none of these boom and bust cycle stuff. It just works. He goes on to explain in that documentary, I think both The Money Masters as well as The Secret of Oz, and The Secret of Oz is the latest one, that President Abraham Lincoln used it during the Civil War, the North and the South, because both the North and South were running out of gold and silver to pay their troops. And their troops don't work for free, of course. So he had a brilliant idea. I'm going to create these things called the greenback dollars. And it's the government currency. You can use it for everything that you can use gold and silver for right now. And it's going to be our currency. And the North did it. And they were able to pay for more than what they needed to pay for. And they won the war thanks to that decision alone. That was a key decision for sure. And he decided, man, this works so good, we want to implement it as the system for the whole country and keep it in play. And as you know, isn't he the guy that had his head blown off by old Wilkes Booth, Jonathan, whatever, Wilkes Booth? Yeah, that's right. That old the crazy nut job. Man, there's always a crazy nut job that benefits the bankers every time. It's just incredible how these nut jobs, these wackos just come out of nowhere and do this. Wow. So that's what the IMF is actually proposing. Are you freaking kidding me? What the hell? Who? Someone's about to get fired over there. Nonetheless, let's listen to what the thoughts are, because holy crap, this is the right thing. And it was posted today from the Telegraph. I don't know we're going to see where this came from, but it says the IMF. And if that's the case, what about the New World Order, one world currency, etc.? Or is that their plan? But I don't know, because old Lindsey Williams and the boys said they're gold and silver, they're going to have it backing their currency. Let's just see. IMF's epic plan to conjure away debt and dethrone bankers. So there is a magic wand after all. A revolutionary paper by the International Monetary Fund claims, and I don't know how old this paper is, we're going to find out, claims that one could eliminate the net public debt of the United States at a stroke of a pen kind of thing. And by implication, do the same for Britain, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc., or Japan, etc. One could slash private debt by 100% of GDP, boost growth, stabilize prices, and dethrone the bankers all at once at the same time. It could be done cleanly and painlessly by legislative command. Congress pass a law, president sign it, done. Far more quickly than anybody imagined. The conjuring trick is to replace our system of private bank-created money, which is roughly 97% of the money supply, and replace it with state or government created money. We return to the historical norm before King Charles II placed control of the money supply. And again, this is a telegraph, so he's referring to their history, not really the United States, but it's pretty much the same. So let me just read that so you understand why they're mentioning King Charles II. Replace the private debt money, etc., with state-created money, with no interest, of course. We return to the historical norm before King Charles II placed control of the money supply. So he placed control of the money supply in the private hands with the English Free Coinage Act of 1666. Specifically, it means an assault on fractional reserve banking, which is great. If lenders are forced to put up 100% reserve backing for deposits, they lose the exorbitant privilege of creating money out of thin air that they have today. You can see why they want to blow off people's heads like the president, such as Abraham Lincoln. Because if he's going to mess with their monopoly on private money and creating money out of thin air to loan to everybody and then own everything after they destroy the value of everything, causing market collapses and economic collapses, and then buy everything they want for pennies on the dollar, you can see why you got a monopoly. You'd want to kind of keep, kind of like a mob boss. You got to keep our area intact. We can't have no outsiders coming in. Exactly. So, the nation regains sovereign control over the money supply. There are no more bank runs, and fewer boom-bust cycles will happen. Accounting legerdemain will do the rest. That, at least, is the argument. Some readers may already have seen the IMF study by Jaromir Bennies and Michael Kumhoff, which came out in August, so that was this year, August, and has begun to acquire a cult following around the world. You could add me to that cult if you want, because this sounds good. Entitled The Chicago Plan Revisited, it revives the scheme first put forward by Professor Henry Simons and Irving Fisher in 1936 during the ferment of creative thinking in the late Great Depression. Irving Fisher thought credit cycles led to an unhealthy concentration of wealth. Like the one we're experiencing now. Yeah, same thing. He saw it with his own eyes in the early 1930s as creditors foreclosed on destitute farmers seizing their land or buying it for a pittance of the bottom of the cycle, or at the bottom of the cycle. The farmers found a way of defending themselves, though, in the end. They muscled together at $1 auctions. Yo! Hold on. Yo! Snip's in here doing a video. Come on. Back to the farmers. They found a way of defending themselves in the end. They muscled together at $1 auctions, buying each other's property back for almost nothing. Any carpetbagger, as they called him, who tried to bid higher was beaten to a pulp by the farmers so that their buddies could buy their land that was in foreclosure for $1, and then they would buy their farm for $1 and then give it back to each other. And any banker or wealthy person that wanted to step in and I'm going to buy up all this stuff for pennies on the dollar got his ass beat to a pulp. And it worked because they didn't show back up. They left the farmers alone and the farmers got their land back. I never knew that. I've never heard of that before. That's actually awesome. That's fantastic. Beans and Kumhoff argue that credit cycle trauma caused by private money creation, aka Federal Reserve, dates deep into history and lies at the root of debt jubilees in ancient times in religions of Mesopotamia and the Middle East. Harvest cycles led to systemic defaults thousands of years ago, with forfeiture of collateral and concentration of wealth, again, in the hands of the lenders. These episodes were not just caused by weather, as long thought, They were amplified by the effects of credit. The Athenian leader Solon implemented the first known Chicago Plan or New Deal in 599 BC to relieve farmers in hoc to oligarchs enjoying private coinage, kind of like the Federal Reserve and all of its member friends, etc., JP Morgan, Citigroup, Bank of America. You know, all those guys who are getting $40 billion a month now? Yeah, those guys. Then, oh, you thought this was new? What's that? You thought this was new? Something happened in the last 100 years? No. Nope, it's been around for a long, long time. As I say, cycles, and history. 599 BC. He canceled debts. So, the Athenian leader, Solon, implemented the first known, what they're calling the Chicago Plan nowadays, or New Deal, in 599 BC. A real leader came to the forefront. Not Romney. Nope. Not going to be Romney. It's not going to be Obama. I'm sorry. But he canceled the debts, restituted lands that were seized by creditors, gave them back to the people, set floor prices for commodities, much like Franklin Roosevelt did, and consciously flooded the money supply with state-issued debt-free money. Flooded it. Everyone, you need a loan, we don't no credit check, you need to go build a farm or build a company, step right up, government will give it to you. Tax-free. And something interesting happens every time that they do this. There is a great booming period, society is at the top, everything's great, and then a few generations will go by, maybe several generations will go by, maybe longer than that, whatever, some little time period later, after everyone forgot about that history, get things changed to where you don't remember it, and all of a sudden someone comes and wants to pay off the people at the top, and even the people at the top, they don't really remember what all happened because it was so many generations ago. And they see all this money and stuff, somehow they're getting, maybe bribes or whatever it is, whatever floats their boat, and they go and change a little law here, a little law there. We're going to institute a private bank. Trust me, it's going to be good for everybody and everyone. Some people may argue, but the mass majority won't know to say no because they've never experienced. Well, what happened? Private bank, why do we need that? Some people may argue, well, look, a few hundred years ago, this is what happened, etc. But then your leaders who you voted for, you may all walk up to them and say, don't do it, just like we did with the healthcare bill. And they say, we're going to do it anyways. I know it's right, you don't. I know you voted for me, but you can't vote me out. I'm already here, so I'm voting for Obamacare. I know 99 of 100 calls coming in. They said, multiple congressmen told us not to. We feel we're smarter than you guys, and we did it anyways. So that's how they get a private bank back in, and then the cycle starts again, boom and bust periods, wealth confiscation, transfer of wealth, etc. The Romans sent a delegation to study Solon's reforms 150 years later and copied the ideas, setting up their own fiat money system under Lex Aeterna in 454 BC. It is a myth innocently propagated by the great Adam Smith that money developed as a commodity-based or gold-linked means of exchange. Gold was always highly valued, but that is another story. Metal lovers often conflate the two issues. Anthropological studies show that the social fiat currencies began with the dawn of time. The Spartans banned gold coins, replacing them with iron discs of little intrinsic value. The early Romans used bronze tablets. Their worth was entirely determined by law, a doctrine made explicit by Aristotle in his Ethics, like the dollar, the euro, or sterling today. Some argue that Rome began to lose its solidarity spirit when it allowed an oligarchy to develop a private silver-based coinage, again, private banking system again, during the Punic Wars. Money slipped control of the Senate. You could call it Rome's shadow banking system, if you will. Evidence suggests that it became a machine for elite wealth accumulation. I've read you many things of the Roman history before this. That's true. And as I just said before I got to that section, time goes on and they change some laws. Now we got a private entity creating the money. You're no longer needed. And then history repeats again. Wars come, famine come, rich and poor classes are divided, middle class gets wiped out, everyone loses property and thinks they're just down on our luck. This is the way the system's always been, and when it hasn't always been that way. And I'm proving to you now for a million times other systems that have worked, and every time they're implemented, the bankers, they let it go for a little while, and people forget about it. They attack, they go in, and they change that law or whatever is in their way. They got to kill people, no problem. They're used to it, that's what they do. Unchallenged sovereign or papal control over currencies persisted through the Middle Ages until England broke the mound in 1666. Baines and Comoff said this was the start of the boom-bust era. One might equally say that this opened the way to England's agricultural revolution in the early 18th century, the Industrial Revolution soon after, and the greatest economic and technological leap ever seen. But let us not quibble. The original authors of the Chicago Plan were responding to the Great Depression. They believed it was possible to prevent the social havoc caused by wild swings from boom to bust in that cycle, and to do so without crimping economic dynamism. The benign side effect of their proposals would be a switch from national debt to national surplus, as if by magic. Quote, because under the Chicago Plan, banks have to borrow reserves from the Treasury to fully back liabilities, the government acquires a very large asset vis-a-vis banks, not the other way around. Our analysis finds that the government, and when I say the other way around, have you heard of banks lending money to municipalities, cities, state governments for bonds in exchange? Yes, you have. They do it to this very day. Our analysis finds that the government is left with a much lower, in fact negative, net debt burden. Imagine that. The IMF paper says total liabilities of the U.S. financial system, including shadow banking, are about 200% of GDP. The new reserve rule would create a windfall. This would be used for potentially a very large buyback of private debt, perhaps 100% of GDP. While Washington would issue much more fiat money, this would not be redeemable. It would be an equity of the Commonwealth, not debt. And that is the key. Yes, the word fiat currency just came out of my mouth. And I said, yes, it's a good idea. How in the hell is that possible? Because there's no bonds attached to the creation of that paper money, where you owe taxes or any interest, which ends up being taxes, on that debt to someone else that somehow has all this money to buy those bonds, which was also created out of the central bank and given to them for free so that they could do just such a thing. So that you will be in debt to them, in servitude to them, paying on that debt forever. Because the very way our system works is that for every dollar that's created or printed or whatever, there is interest attached to it automatically. When they print the dollar, they do not print the interest to pay for the dollar. They print the dollars first and then start charging interest a month later. So you have to use the current dollars that are out there to help pay the interest on the dollars that are already out there, but you get a little month in advance or late because, the first interest payment technically is a month later if you follow me. So in other words, you're always going to be paying interest, and they're always going to have to create the principal only, never the interest. Therefore, you can never pay off the debt. It's impossible in the current system. And that's just the way they like it, because then they'll never go away. They're always going to need that private central bank to be there. Whereas this gets rid of all that, and the government can print as much money as they want. They can print $200 trillion tomorrow. And as long as there's no debt attached to it, everything's fine. And especially in a country like America, because we don't need anything anywhere else. We have all the resources we need in our country, so it's not like we can get into some kind of currency war by doing that with another country. We don't have to worry about that. We just simply do everything here locally, pay for it with whatever money the government creates. There'll never be layoffs in government because of, terrible tax collection. You would completely get rid of property taxes. You'd completely get rid of paying for driver's license fees. You'd completely get rid of paying for any and all taxes you've ever paid for or ever even heard about paying for. There'd be no income tax. There would be nothing. Why? Because the government would simply print it interest-free, bond-free to pay itself, basically, its employees. How is this a bad idea? Think about that. Has Mitt Romney said anything about that in these debates? Have they even leaned in that direction? And I say they, as in him and Obama. No. So if you think change is coming when old Romney or Obama or whoever gets in there, both of them, whoever, you're delusional. If they're not even talking about stuff like this, they're going to be the ones fighting tooth and nail to keep the way it is. Why? Because who is backing Romney massively with cash? The banks that also did the same for Obama in 2008. And now they've left Obama and went straight for Romney. Banker, banker, banker. The same bankers that own the Federal Reserve are flooding Romney full of cash. Do you think for 1 second if he was in charge, he's going to allow this to take place? I want to be wrong on that. I want to say, Joe, I told you old Romney was that deal. He was the right guy. I'd love to be wrong. I'm not going to. And I can straight face look at you right now and say that. I know better. The key of the Chicago Plan was to separate the monetary and credit functions of the banking system. The quantity of money and the quantity of credit would become completely independent of each other. Private lenders would no longer be able to create new deposits, basically out of thin air like they do now. New bank credit would have to be financed by retained earnings, not creating new money out of thin air. The control of credit growth would become much more straightforward because the banks would no longer be able to, as they are today, to generate their own funding and deposits. In the act of lending, an extraordinary privilege that is not enjoyed by any other type of business, of course, says the IMF paper. Rather, banks would become what many erroneously believe them to be today, pure intermediaries that depend on obtaining outside funding before being able to lend. The U.S. Federal Reserve would take real control of the money supply for the first time. They're assuming the Federal Reserve would still function with this new system, whereas I would say get rid of it completely, because that's the problem. We don't want the same foxes watching over our hen house, even though the rules change for the better. Now, they need to go too. But, since it's in the article, I'm going to read it. The U.S. Federal Reserve would take real control over the money supply for the first time. I mean, it already does in its current system, so I don't know why they're wording it like that, but whatever. The Federal Reserve will take real control over the money supply for the first time, making it easier to manage inflation. It was precisely for this reason that Milton Friedman called for 100% reserve backing in 1967. Even the great marketeer implicitly favored a clampdown on private money. The switch would engender a 10% boost to long-arm economic output. None of these benefits come at the expense of diminishing the core useful functions of a private financial system. Simons and Fisher were flying blind in the 1930s. They lacked the modern instruments needed to crunch the numbers, so the IMF team has now done it for them. Using the DSGE stochastic model, now de rigueur in high economics, loved and hated in equal measure, the finding is startling. Simons and Fisher understated their claims. It is perhaps possible to confront the banking plutocracy head without endangering the economy. You can chop off the head of this beast without even hurting the economy. Wow. Imagine that. Why have I never heard about this in history of school? Never heard about these things. These names they're talking. I don't know who these guys are. Interesting that that's left out. Huh. Wonder who has their hand in writing our history and our knowledge in our school system. Suppose the same banking cartel. No. Baines and Kumhoff make large claims. They leave me baffled, to be honest. Readers who want the technical details can make their own judgment by studying the text here. And it's an IMF link, actually. The IMF duo have supporters. Professor Richard Werner from Southampton University, who coined the term quantitative easing, or QE, in the 1990s, testified to Britain's Vickers Commission that a switch to state money would have major welfare gains. He was backed by the campaign group Positive Money and the New Economics Foundation. The theory also has strong critics, of course. Oh, yeah. Tim Congdon from International Monetary Research says banks are in a sense already being forced to increase reserve by EU rules, Basel III rules, and gold-plated variants in the UK. The effect has been to choke lending to the private sector. I'm almost done, by the way. He argues that is the chief reason why the world economy remains stuck in near slump and why central banks are having to cushion the shock with quantitative easing. He says if you enact this plan, it would devastate bank profits and cause a massive deflationary disaster. They would have to do QE squared to offset it, he said. Yeah, but that's also assuming, if you do what these guys are saying and get rid of the whole private banking system at its core, the way it is now, and go to what I like to call constitutional money, but even the Constitution still allowed the government to borrow money, so that's how they kind of got around that. We need to fix that one piece in the Constitution. No borrowing allowed, period. This guy is obviously for the banks. We've already seen history, and I just read a lot of it to you right here off of this, that proves this works. So his comments are relevant. The result would be a huge shift in bank balance sheets from private lending to government securities. This happened during World War II, but that was the anomalous cost of defeating fascism. To do this on a permanent basis in peacetime would be to change. I love how they say it peacetime, as if it's really peacetime right now with all the crap we got going on in the Middle East. To do this on a permanent basis in peacetime would be to change in the nature of Western capitalism. People wouldn't be able to get money from banks. There would be huge demand to the efficiency of the economy, he said. Arguably, it would be smoother. It would smother freedom and enthrone a Leviathan state. It might be even more irksome in the long run than rule by bankers. Now, granted, who's this sound like? Who's saying this? Obviously, a paid shill from the bankers. I mean, this is obvious. So, one thing is sure, the City of London will have great trouble earning its keep if any variant of the Chicago plan ever gains wide support. So this is a very interesting article, to say the least. If this was implemented tomorrow, all of our problems would be fixed. Even if it led to some kind of deflationary destruction. Doesn't matter, the market's going to be destroyed anyways. That's deflation. So let it deflate and implement this new change, and I don't think you're going to have a complaint from anybody. You will have plenty of jobs to go around because there's going to be plenty of money to go around in this system, and it will be debt-free. There will be no more taxes at all. Zero taxes. Every single tax you can think of. You ever see that little video floating around there from time to time on YouTube? 100 taxes that didn't exist, 100 years ago or something like that. And it lists every tax you can think of. Marriage tax, your estate tax, all these taxes. Fishing tax, hunting tax, all this crap. And all that would go away. There would be no need to pay that because those fees help pay for government functions and services, right? There would be no need to pay for it. The government would fund itself with its own money supply. That means all the money you make, you keep. Property taxes goes away. Now you really, truly have private property rights. Nobody can ever come take your house, and the government can't say, "Well, you owe us back taxes for 2 years. We're seizing your house for $3,000 or $4,000, and then it's worth $100 and something, $200,000, and then they go sell it to get their little $3,000 or $4,000 you owed them." That would go away completely. You would own it, and nobody could ever take it from you. So, this is definitely the answer. But before we get to this answer, history is telling me there's a lot of pain coming in between. And during that pain, you're going to want to hold on to precious metals. And then after the pain, hopefully, this kind of system gets implemented by the people. Because the governments aren't just going to willfully do it. Because the current system is paying them with bribes, campaign contributions, etc. So, it's probably going to come by force. But very interesting article. Take care.